let's get it started.
All right, and you're going. All right, so we'll just leave that, and then you can share your screen in a second. We'll get started.
Yep, let's get it started now.
Okay. All right. Well, look. Welcome to everyone. I'm not sure how many people we've got. I think Iman's still
41 and
43. 40, yeah, 41. Okay. Well, welcome to everyone. And unfortunately, here we are in Sydney. It's another one of these unfortunate situations where we can't meet face to face. So we really regret that, but it's out of our control. So we just got to make the best of it that we can. So that's what we plan to do tonight. So look, Iman and I, as we do every month, we have a chat about what are we going to offer up for our meetup, and we want to keep this stuff fresh if we can. We want to give up a variety of content and those sorts of things. And so we decided that today we would just do something a little bit more casual. So it's just going to be Iman and I, and we're just going to be chatting. We're going to be talking about stuff. And we're using this overarching topic of Power BI roles and career paths. So there are often people within our meetup who used to come to the face-to-face sessions that would say to us they were between jobs. And maybe, Iman, what do you think? Maybe 10 to 15% of the people participating at any particular time, I think, are looking for a new opportunity.
It's about right, yes. That is
yeah.
Or some people may want to change career, or they want to promote in the same job. So I think this can relate to almost all of those groups.
Yeah, so look, so Iman's prepared some slides. So as you know, Iman and his company Agile Analytics are the major sponsors of our meetup. So thank you, Iman, as always. Iman's pretending he's coming in from the CBD, but I'm pretty sure he's coming in from the Central Coast. So with his lifestyle change.
I still have the view of Sydney CBD from my Central Coast.
Yeah, exactly. So, so look, Iman's prepared some slides, but these slides are really sort of discussion starters, if you like. So there's no formal presentation as such. We're just going to sort of work our way through the slides. We're just going to talk about the topic of roles and careers. And we'd love you to ask questions and to sort of participate in the discussion by asking questions or taking it in a particular direction if that's what you would like to do. So there should be a chat option. Iman, is there? So there's a chat option there. Some people have already started chatting. Yes. So when you put the chats, just make sure that you do chat for everyone so that other people can see your questions as well. And then between Iman and I, will do our best to monitor any questions that are coming through, and we'll go from there. So Iman, so I'll hand over to you, and you can take it from here.
Thanks, Matt, and good evening, everyone. We have 60 and now 61 people and still joining, which is really good. I think we had over 100 people in our meetup and another 100 in LinkedIn, or some maybe in 2 platforms. So I'm expecting to get more people in this session, which is interesting because when Matt and I discussed about that a couple of weeks ago, we were not even sure if that would be like interesting topic to anyone. But anyway, good to see you, and hopefully you will find some useful information. As Matt said, we just make it casual, and as usual, I want to start with a bit of sponsor notes. I don't want to call ourselves as sponsors anymore because we don't do pizza and beers and those things. But anyway, let's just see. Basically, I love those effects. Agile, as you know, Agile Analytics, we are a Microsoft Gold partner and a specialist consulting firm. We do end-to-end consulting, design, delivery of data analytics and BI projects. And these are the services we do. Some of you may know us because of the apps that we have in Power Apps, or the solutions that we have in different industries or business functions. Recently, our CRM analytics has been selected as a preferred solution in AppSource. Sorry, that's a Power BI app, and we made it as free. So you can go to AppSource, you can just connect it to your Dynamics 365 CE, completely free, use it. And then if you want to get the PBIX file, do some customization, change of branding, add reports, you can contact us to get a premium version of that, which is very affordable subscription model. So that's the link if you want to go and have a look at the demo, as well as maybe connect it to your Dynamics. All right, we have a free ticket to our next training. So I don't know how we're going to give it away, but might be the best question, or maybe just ask question or I don't know, we will figure out one way or another. Matt, do you have something to add for your upcoming training sessions?
Nothing specifically from an upcoming training session, but I would like to say that so many of you would know that Ken Pools and Miguel Escobar wrote M is for Data Monkey, fantastic Power Query book. That book is now, I want to say 3 years old, maybe 4 years old. It's just been updated. You're probably aware of that. It's been announced for some time. I do have the paperback version of that book available in Australia from my website, which I will put the short code in right now into the chat in case you would like to have a look. So this book is available from my shop in paperback. If you buy it from me, you'll get a PDF version as well. It's a so that you can have both electronic and the paper version. And I do have a 2-week special where it's free shipping. So normally it's 10 bucks to ship. But if you buy 2 books at the moment from my shop, you have to buy 2 books. You get free shipping. So if you're interested in buying that great book, it's available in my shop. So that's all I've got, Iman.
Excellent. Thanks, Matt. So I think we have over 70 people now, which is really good. And I see a lot of names, not that I know everyone, but I think there are a lot of new people. So maybe just put in the chat window if you are new and this is your first time, so we know how many of you are new. But anyway, good to see all of you. Hopefully next time we'll be face-to-face so we can see each other in person. All right, so we want to talk about Power BI roles and career paths. As Matt said, we want to talk about our personal experience to share something that worked for us. Maybe it can be useful for you. You are welcome to ask questions, and some of you may even, join this conversation and add your own input as well. So this is actually me and Matt, as you see, 2 different people.
I look a bit younger.
Yeah. Sorry?
I look a bit younger in that photo. Wasn't that long ago? Yeah,
sure, really.
I think it's too much lockdown, too much alcohol during lockdown, I think.
I'm definitely, in a different shape now, I guess, in terms of weight and shape. But yeah, hopefully that will fix soon. So, Matt, do you want to talk about yourself? You come from business background, maybe a bit of background, what you did and how you got to the Power BI role.
Yeah, and look, I'll just take a few minutes, and many of you may have heard my story. I mean, there are a few articles on the web. Very early on, I got involved with Rob Colley at Power Pivot Pro, now called P3 Adaptive, and I did a lot of work over there, and I've done some podcasts, and people have been interested in my the way I got to where I am, because a lot of people would like to do the type of work that I'm doing. So the longer version of the background is that I originally worked at Woolworths. I was there for about 8 years. So I learned about customer service. One of the great things I learned working in a supermarket is I learned about customer service, doing the right thing by customers. And then I spent 25 years at Coca-Cola. So in business roles for 15 years, and then in IT for 10 years. So the first 15 years in business, I loathed IT. I mean, there's probably some people, or maybe some people will watch this and I used to work with them, I don't know. But I spent 15 years in business thinking that IT wasn't supporting me. And then I moved into IT, and to be honest, I had visions of grandeur. I thought I was going to go in there and do all these wonderful things. But what I discovered in the 10 years that I worked in IT is it's actually pretty hard to deliver good quality IT services to a business. But I did have the benefit of seeing both sides of the fence. So I knew what it was like to be a customer of IT. I knew what it was like to service customers of IT. I guess the key thing for me is that I've always liked data. So I started with Excel, and I actually started with Lotus 1-2-3, that's the truth. I taught myself to program, using macros in Lotus 1-2-3, then Excel, then Microsoft Access, AS400 Query, and then various other things. I'm not a programmer, and I certainly don't have any professional IT background. And in my last role at Coke, I was the BI director for Asia Pacific, and that's where I discovered Power Pivot. So the first version of Power BI was Power Pivot for Excel. I discovered Power Pivot. I just thought it was such a fantastic piece of software. And it was back in 2014, so April 2014, when I left Coca-Cola and started my own business. And I've basically been using Power Pivot for Excel or Power Query, and now more recently Power BI ever since then. And I'm basically a freelance consultant who I sell my expertise at an hourly rate, right? So I'm available for hire. I'll give you 10 minutes of my time. I mean, look, I charge a premium rate for my time, but you also don't have to pay for me for a week, right? You just pay for my expertise. And that's the business model that I've developed. I guess my strength is in training and delivering of content, explaining concepts. So my blog, I think, has been successful because I explain concepts to people in a way that they understand. The book that I wrote, people tell me it's very a good tool to people to learn, particularly people with a business background, which is the point that Iman's got on this slide. So, you know, I have a technical understanding, nowhere near as deep as many of you on the call, I'm sure. But I have enough understanding of the technical side, and I can interpret it and translate it into business language and explain it to people who need to understand from a business sense. And so, and I'm sure each of you, you know, you have your own skill as well. And I think one of the things about being successful in this space is to understand where your strengths are and to work on your strengths. You know, don't try and be everything. Don't say, well, I'm really weak at this, so therefore I should put all my effort on X, Y, Z because I'm weak at it. I think people do that too often. I think you should focus on your strengths rather than spend a lot of your time focusing on your weaknesses or the areas that you're not as good and strong at. But so sorry, Iman, I sort of went off for a little bit there, but do you want to sort of talk about your background and how your background is different to me?
Sure, Matt. No, that was good. And just to give everyone a bit of overview, we talk about this because we think that there are typically two types of people. Some people who come from business background and they know Excel, they know business, they know some kind of like a use cases that they need to solve problem for business, and some people who come from IT background like me. Well, if I want to go back, I started because Damien said that he was 9 years old. He did, I don't know, some really old stuff, Lotus 123 on MS-DOS or something. So if I want to maybe go back, I started with BASIC in Commodore 64 when I was maybe 9 or 10 years old. So now I guess when I moved to Australia, I shifted to BI 15 years ago or 16 years ago. And at the time, that was SQL Server 2005 with SSIS, SSRS, if you know them, as like a traditional BI tools in Microsoft platform. And then since the beginning of Power BI, or even before the release of Power BI, when it was only add-ons in Excel, I kind of shifted my focus because I find it very interesting tool and a game changer because it enabled people to become, you know, BI experts without knowing all those complexity of, you know, IT and so on. So yes, my background is in IT, and Matt is obviously in business. I started two businesses in, you know, Microsoft BI space, specifically with Power BI. And what I will share with you is my personal experience with those and what I see the market is going and the demand in that in this area. So, Matt,
so Iman, just related to this, Roland asked a question in the chat, and I'll sort of talk to that in a second. But basically, Roland is talking about the fact that the Power BI tool, his theory is that it's bringing the business people and IT people closer together by delivering a tool that is perhaps not extremely technical. So if you go back, you know, you talked about SSIS and you know, SSAS, and if you go back to multi-dimensional SSAS to learn MDX, my understanding, I've never written MDX, but my understanding is it's quite a complex language. So Iman, have you got any experience? Is that true?
Absolutely, yes. Well, I'm probably one of the only few people in the world who likes MDX. I
You
think
and
that we
Chris Webb.
have
Chris Webb as
Chris
well.
Webb, and we have maybe a few people that I
I
can
think
see
Phil
in there.
Seamark likes it as well.
Yes, but I agree, it wasn't easy at all. And I think, introducing DAX and tabular modeling and, in, some functions that are common between Excel and Power BI, I think that was very smart move by Microsoft to make it
Yeah,
easier for business users to understand.
exactly. And so, look, I don't have a deep understanding of the history, but I know Rob Colley very well. So Rob Colley was the first program manager on Power Pivot, and they basically pulled a team of Excel people together with the team from SSAS to build Power Pivot from scratch. And I think that was deliberate. They wanted to close the gap. They wanted this tool to be accessible to the Excel professional. So I think your point there is quite right, Roland, that there was a deliberate attempt to bring these things closer together. Now, but there was also a technology starting point, and that is that Microsoft, and I'm pretty sure, I can't think of the top of my mind who it was, but there's someone inside Microsoft who actually developed the tabular technology or at least the conceptual framework for the tabular database. And I've got his, Amir Netz is the guy's name. So now there's a really good podcast. If you search Amir Netz podcast, and I got a feeling it might have been Casper on BI. I'm not 100% sure. Maybe someone who's listening can Google it and let me know. But there's a podcast by Amir Netz, and I'm pretty sure it was the Casper on BI podcast. It's a really good session that tells you the history of how the whole database was developed and the thought process behind Amir. And so yes, they definitely set out to make this more accessible to the Excel user. And I think it's a fantastic insight that Microsoft had, because the world was the truth is, most reports by the number of reports in the world were Excel spreadsheets. Now, as you know, I said I've been on both sides, IT and business side, and I just know the realities. Now, there are IT departments in this world that think that every single BI report should be professionally built by the IT department. But the reality is the IT department neither has the resource, funding, or time to build every single report that every single business user needs. And so the reality is that Excel was the predominant report tool out there. And I think the development of Power Pivot and Power Query, and then more recently Power BI, recognizes that fact. And by building a tool that is good for BI professionals and good for business professionals, good quality Excel business professionals, I think it absolutely has closed that gap. And that's why we're here today. And frankly, I think that's why Microsoft are absolutely kicking everyone else's butt in this space, and they will for the next 5 to 10 years. I think this is a generational product. I can't see any other company coming close to Microsoft on this product in the next 10 years. I'm definitely biased. I mean, if someone else has got a different view, be happy to hear it. But
well, I'm sure everyone's here agree with you, Matt, because you're a fan of Power BI. But yes, I can tell you that even compared to 2-3 years ago, it's a massive change now in the market. Like maybe before it was mainly Click and Tableau and some other niche players,
yeah.
But now Microsoft, like we get a lot of requests that the projects are to migrate from Tableau to Power BI, from Click to Power BI. So that seems to be a very a big trend in the market, that they want to move away from the other vendors. Even though I personally believe that Tableau is still very good and mature product. But
Tableau is a fantastic product, but let there be no mistake. But Tableau, and the history, as many of you would know, Tableau is a fantastic visualization tool. What Microsoft did differently to Tableau is Microsoft started with the data model first, so the database, then they moved to the ETL, so Power Query, then they moved to the visualization layer. Only because they built it in Excel first, they didn't have a visualization layer. They were actually using Power Pivot for Excel or pivot tables in Excel as the visualization layer. So Microsoft had actually built the core of the ETL and the database before they even started on the visualization. Tableau did exactly the opposite. They built a fantastic visualization tool, and they just relied on other data sources. And I think they just got caught out, to be honest. I mean, they had such a good tool in the visualization layout, they just didn't know how to do the other thing.
I think the assumption is that data quality and data shape is always good, which is not always the case. And Melanie, thanks for reminding that Tableau is now acquired by Salesforce, as we know. But I mean, Salesforce is good at getting companies or acquiring companies and maybe killing them, which I think that's what's happening with Tableau.
And I think that's the writing on the wall. I mean, the management of Tableau would know that Microsoft, is unstoppable. And so to sell out when they did, I think made absolute sense. Something that you may not know is that the people behind Tableau were actually the same people behind Pixar Studios. So one of the original guys from Tableau actually has got an Academy Award for Toy Story, I think it was. And so if you think about the skill that animators have, or digital animators, it's all about visualization, and that's how they got into that product. I saw Bao put a link up there. So if you see the link in the chat from Bao, thanks for finding that, Bao. That's exactly the podcast. It's a great podcast. If you're interested in the history, have a listen to that one. Someone also posted, I can't remember who that was, earlier on, that so Gabriel, thank you for posting. Yeah, so the Raw Data podcast by P3. I did a podcast with Rob Colley. It was that was a lot of fun, and talked a bit about my background. There's also one that I did with Lars Schreiber. I can't remember. It's SSBI podcast, I think his is called. So Lars Schreiber. So the one I did with Lars was more about my history background, how I came into this career. The one with Rob was a little bit more, it was a little bit off the wall, but that Rob's like that. He's a pretty quirky guy, so that was a little bit more fun.
Good. So we have 89 people now in the room, and for the ones that are recently just joined us now, Matt and I are talking about our personal experience from two different paths. Matt is from business background, I'm from IT background. Then in the next slides, we will talk about some of the roles and what we think are the maybe demand in the market, and we can make it based on whatever question that you have. Like you can ask your questions in the chat window. And Amy, thanks for the suggestion. Amy said that, do you have a data/Power BI coffee meetup, weekly, bi-weekly? We don't have such a thing, but we just started with Owen and Kane from today to just have a very casual conversation about the updates. As soon as they release any update, we're going to share that. And from next month, we're going to make it open to everyone to join for half an hour to talk about the latest updates and what does excite you the most and those things. So we will do that, but I don't think we have such a plan for a coffee meetup, but that's probably a good idea, and we can think about it. So Matt, do we want to move on to some of the roles that are usually advertised in Power BI? Because we see a lot of different terminologies, like we see Power BI developer, report builder, administrator, data modeler, architect, data analyst, data scientist. So maybe we can talk about some of those. What do they do? What does it mean? What skill we need?
Yeah, and this is directly related, I think, to Roland's earlier point and question about, the bringing together of the business and the IT roles. Because, if I look at those roles, and there's a little bit of crossover here, and I think, different companies are going to advertise for different roles. But maybe report builder is a good, easy one to start with. So, I'll give you my interpretation, maybe, and I'm interested in yours as well, Iman. But my expectation of a report builder is someone who takes the model, which has already been built, and knows how to visualize data. So they would have critical thinking skills. They would need a good understanding of the business. Now, I say that actually with a bit of caution, because if you go back to a pure IT world, what I would call enterprise business intelligence. The way I've seen those projects executed in the past is that IT goes to the business user and says, please give me your requirements. Tell me what you want built from your report. And so they might do some mock-ups, and they might, they build a report with a wireframe or something like that. And then once you've got that as a requirement, the way a typical BI project would work is that they would then specify what are the sources of the data. They would understand that then they need to load all the data, build the data model, and then start building the reports. But I guess that tends to be sort of more of a waterfall type approach, I guess, the more traditional way of doing things. And whereas I think one of the things Power BI facilitates is more of an agile prototyping, and then the prototype becomes the final product. So I think that's something that happens. So I think a report builder can be anyone that can analyze data. But I think in the Power BI world, I think that role is better as a business person. Whereas I think perhaps if you went back to, I'd be interested in your view on this, Iman, but say something like SSRS, I mean, report builder. So when you're building something with report builder, you needed to be a bit of an IT person. Is that right? Or is that not right?
Sorry, I was admitting some of the people. Can you repeat that? I missed that.
Yeah, so with SSRS, when you used to use report builder, was that, would you consider that to be more of an IT role?
Yeah, it was traditionally like a IT person who does this, canned standard reports in SSRS. I think now with the Power BI report builder, that becomes a bit more accessible to maybe what we call like a citizen BI developer, or whatever you want to call it, like a power user. So this can be done by any like a power user. But I personally believe that that's still a bit of technical, I guess, learning curve for someone without any IT background to learn those tools. So I still consider it as IT tool.
Yeah, so I mean, so it depends whether you say report builder is using paginated reports, but of course, someone that builds a report in Power BI Desktop is also a report builder.
Yes,
and I don't think there's a good. This is my personal view. I think you're better off to get a good business person to be the report builder rather than to take the SSRS report builder from multi-dimensional days and someone who's skilled in building paginated reports. I think you're better off. That person is probably not the best business report builder.
Exactly. Look, these are the job titles that I search on Seek, and I agree. Like Damien mentioned that report builder and possibly data modeler isn't a distinct role, but just something that. So yes, absolutely, I agree. And from my side, I usually categorize them into two buckets. People who work within IT and people who work with business. And mainly IT roles are like Power BI developer, someone who can do end-to-end, development from Power Query, data modeling, DAX visualization. So it's like a Power BI developer. And then we may have Power BI admin. I personally haven't seen many Power BI admins. In most organizations that I work with, they have someone who is maybe their Office 365 admin who is also looking after Power BI tenant, or that role is like not a dedicated Power BI admin. But I definitely think that there's a need for someone who understands the Power BI admin portal and all the administration related to that, like the admin API and so on. And then we have Power BI architect, which probably I haven't seen that as a distinct role. It's mainly a solution architect who also understands Power BI. And then there are some other roles. But on the business side, Matt, do you want to cover some of those?
Yeah, look, and I think there's, as you mentioned, there's certainly some crossover here. So, I mean, as I said up front, I come from a business background. Now, I think I could successfully do a role as a Power BI developer. I think I could successfully do a role as an architect, a data analyst. So with my business background, I could do all three of those roles competently, I think. Power BI administrator, I think, is a bit more technical and it's quite specific. And so I agree, Iman. I think someone who is more like an O365 administrator type person. And in most companies, that wouldn't be a full-time job, I wouldn't have thought, unless they bring in some other things such as workspace management, overall control. I use that's the correct word, control, but this is a whole conversation in its own right. How much control should IT have over business users? I mean, it's a huge conversation in its own right. Data scientist is quite an interesting one because I think my personal opinion, if you went to LinkedIn and said, show me everyone that's got data scientists in their job title, my view is about 10% of them would be data scientists and 90% of them would not be. Now, if you're a data scientist and you are a real one, then you're in the 10%. So, but I just have this perception that it's a sort of a bit of a buzzword, but a true data scientist would be using tools of the trade. And Matt Burnham, you put a post in here before talking about Python, and there's a book coming out Matt's mentioned, so that's available further back in the chat. You can find that if you're interested. But I would expect a data scientist is a statistician, or has a deep understanding of statistics. They use tools like R and Python to do data cleansing, manipulation, outlier analysis, those sorts of things. So it's a very specialist role, and I would see Power BI as just one of the tools that they could use to visualize data at some point in time.
That's right. There's a question about what does Power BI administrator do? I will cover it a bit later, but as I mentioned, in a large organizations, they usually need someone to, number one, look after Power BI tenant to understand, all those configurations in the admin portal, premium capacity setting, monitoring that, all the usage logs that you need to monitor, operational security, potentially, the workspaces and apps and all those, making sure that there's no no risk in terms of security and data sensitivity, and all those things that a good admin should be able to do. And now there are a lot of good APIs available with Power BI API. You can do a lot of those using PowerShell and automate that. And gateway, thanks, Damien. Yes, enterprise gateway, setting up gateway, and all those data sources and refreshes, data flows, and so on. So
and there's quite a bit of work and maintenance, Iman. So like if an employee leaves and that employee is the owner of a workspace, then someone needs to take ownership back from that exited employee and assign a new administrator and all those sorts of things. So I think the key thing I heard you say there, Iman, was PowerShell. I mean, that's one of the tools of the trade of the Power BI administrator, right?
Absolutely. And there are not many people who use that, unfortunately. And I saw a lot of Power BI admins still do manual work, and there's a lot of good, API options available now. Even with the latest update today, now you can do a lot more. So for new people who joined, we are talking about Power BI roles and career paths, very casual conversation. Feel free to join this conversation or ask your questions in the chat window. Just wondering if you guys can see me and Matt on there, because I'm new in Zoom. I'm just trying to figure out how to spotlight both of us. So you can see me and Matt on your screen, right? So, okay, thank you.
All right. Now, there's a couple of other questions and comments that I just want to throw to before we move on. So a few people have said, well, these aren't necessarily distinct roles, and that's absolutely correct. So it really depends on the size of your organization. So, very large organizations are more likely to have specialist roles. But a lot of organizations don't have an IT role at all in Power BI. So even though, these things on the left are IT roles, there are many, many organizations, small to medium-sized enterprises, businesses up to 100 people, that sort of size, that have no one in IT that does this. Increasingly, IT is sort of software as a service, or a service outsourced, and so a virtual IT department. And so really there's typically someone, the person who discovered Power BI is normally the one, the person who's most passionate. They get to be the Power BI administrator, and they get to, build all the data models and build the reports and those sorts of things. And then often they will then need to reach out to someone externally to get some help when they need that. And then both Iman's company provides skills and people to do that, and I tend to do more of the hourly type work, as I mentioned before. Just another thing about the report building, and I sort of talked about this process in traditional IT where you actually specify the reports, you pass it across to the report builder, and then the report builder builds it, and then they give it back, and there's a couple of backs and forth. I think Power BI, the product, Power BI Desktop, is a lot more flexible for prototyping. So I would expect that you would sort of build a first cut of the report based on your understanding, and then even let the business user get involved. And you can actually build reports online. So publish your Power BI Desktop file to the workspace and give editing rights to the business user, and you can collaborate together and build out new reports, and then download the PBIX file, which then becomes the master. So you can build your reports online and then still get a new copy of your PBIX file down the track. And so this sort of old enterprise approach where you specify the requirements, then build the requirements, I think that goes away with Power BI and with the ability for business users to work with IT users. And in fact, if that process doesn't go away, I think you're missing a big opportunity, because a lot of the times business users don't know what they need because they've never had it before. Now, I don't know, some of you may follow me on my blog. I've been sharing a series on building a COVID report for Australia over the last, I don't know, couple of months. And I'm building it as I go. I have a requirement, I want to see some data, I build a report, and I'm sharing some of the things that I do when I build out the report. But in my blog article this week, I went back and fixed a whole lot of things that, with the benefit of hindsight, they're not, the way I did it was not the way it should have been done. But I didn't know that at the time. And I think this is the reality. I think, sometimes through blogs, you sort of share these beautiful reports. I mean, take the report, Iman, the CRM report that you shared, right? So this is a freely available report. Someone has put some effort into building that. And I'm sure the way it is today was not version 1.0, right? You would have built it, used it, you get some feedback, you improve it, you make changes. These things should be living and breathing assets that grow and improve over time.
Absolutely, yes. So I have a question for everyone. Maybe you can type into the chat window, but there is one thing that we all have in common. I mean, all those roles that I mentioned, and we may come from, IT background, business background, Excel or SQL or whatever. So what is it that we all have in common when we say that we do Power BI or any of those roles? I give you a few seconds to think about it, and maybe we can have that prize too. They earn a lot. I agree. Well, I think it's been crazy, especially in the last few weeks. I've seen things that I cannot believe, that, people who were even happy to get free internship job, now they're getting like 6-figure salaries, and they're asking for something that we normally get like people with 5 to 10 years of experience. So I know that's like a crazy market. Hopefully that won't last, or maybe for you it will be good to keep it like that. But what else? We all work with data, that's right. Knowledge, correct. Yes, absolutely. Data analyst. I think these are all correct, yes. But what I have in mind is that we solve problems. So our job are to solve some problems in IT or business. And I categorize them into, again, 2 buckets, IT and business. So again, these are the slides that I put together just very quickly and randomly during my between my meetings today. So if you find any issues or even typos or something, please let me know. And I'm fine if you absolutely disagree with those. I'm happy to be challenged. But I think from IT, it's mainly about, the security of data, the system governance, having a scalable solution, maintainable, high performance, good data quality, and so on. On the other hand, business wants to get some insights from their data, to make data-driven decisions, to improve efficiency, or reduce cost. So it's mainly around those, and then there are many use cases on each side. So I want to maybe know more about you, Matt. What do you think? And maybe if anyone has some thoughts on that, you can type into the chat window.
Yeah, look, I agree with the points that you've got there, and this comes back to, you know, in my experience. So when I worked in IT, what I saw was, you know, the thing on the left that really strikes me is the scalable, maintainable, data quality. High, I mean, actually, if I think about it, all of those things. I mean, these are the things that the IT department is responsible for. The business does not care if or what the reason that the server doesn't keep up. I don't care. You know, it's your job to fix the server so that it works. You know, that's basically what they delegate that responsibility out. So, and it's expensive to do that properly, right? To have the right skilled people. So to have a highly available system, you have to have obviously the hardware, but you also have to have a support mechanism. What's the process when it goes down? Who recovers? You've got to document all the recovery processes. I mean, these things take time. Whereas a typical business delivered solution, which in the past would have been Excel spreadsheet, now increasingly it's Power BI, you've still got all that knowledge in the head of the business user that built it. And so, you know, if they've got a Power BI desktop on their, if they've got the gateway installed on their laptop, and it's refreshing every day, and they go on holidays, and something breaks, you know, anything could break. It could be something as simple as, I don't know, a capitalization change in a column name, in a table, in an Excel file, on a SharePoint site. And all of a sudden, it stops refreshing, all right? Who's going to fix it? So I think, so one of the challenges of business-only Power BI solutions is that I don't think the business people really have the depth of understanding of what IT does as a profession. And I think the average citizen developer would not build a highly secure, maybe security is fine, but certainly not around governance, maintainability. Probably those two are the main areas that I think would be missed by the average business user. And yeah, so and those things on the right, of course, are things that business people are trying to solve problems for. I think there's another point about the stuff on the right, and that is that often the requirement for a business user is very short term. So, typical, let's take a P&L, for example. I mean, that is a long-term recurring report that needs to be used and refreshed over time. But a very short-term event might be, we need to drive down our, I don't know, travel expense within across the business. So how do you do that? Well, you need to start building some reports that then track travel expense over time and then comparing departments. So you have these very short-term needs that typically mean that you don't want to go back to IT and get a brand new database built to solve that problem. So ideally, you've got business people that can just build new reports on top of an existing data set, provided that it was built with the right insights. I just want to take this opportunity, Iman, because there was a question from Karim early on about asking whether these roles can be performed 100% remotely. And look, I think generally they can. I think we all learned a lot about working remotely in the last 18 months. But I also, you know, for me, being able to sit with a customer is something that is very difficult to replace. You know, when I did some of my early work in consulting, I was working with a client and I was on site 2 days a week. And I actually went and sat at the desk of the user that wanted a report and got them to show me what they were doing. Now, you can do that with Zoom, you can do screen share and stuff, but it's also the personal relationships that you build. I think these jobs can be done remotely, but if you can get some face-to-face time of some sort, I think, particularly when it comes down to that customer-facing piece, I think it's invaluable.
Yeah, I agree, Matt. And look, as you said, we've been doing remote work, like agile analytics, it's 100% remote since last March. So it's not that we cannot do, but I agree that sometimes, like I feel that when we have this face-to-face and we get everyone in the room, do some whiteboarding session, like we have a few people here that we probably did that. Damien, you probably remember in ABC, we just, get into the room and we just have brainstorming session, whiteboarding, and then coming up with solutions, building some prototype and just quickly getting feedback. That's I guess, the gap that you cannot fill in with remote work. But it's not that it's impossible. We can do almost everything remotely, but probably not as efficient as when we do face-to-face in some of the business-facing roles and conversations. So
I think, sorry, Iman, I just thought of something else that I think is relevant to this group, assuming most people here are from Australia. But I think there's one of the things that this whole pandemic has done and the move to remote working is that there's a risk for onshore workers if remote working becomes too successful, because the truth is most of our jobs could be replaced by people in other countries who would do the job for a lot less than they would need to pay us doing it here in Australia. So we just have to be a little bit careful about what we wish for when it comes to 100% remote working, and so we have to have something to offer over and above what the lowest price person in the world who's willing to do the work remotely can do. Otherwise, yeah, we're going to be out of a job, I think.
Yeah, I kind of agree, and some people may disagree. Like Ronald mentioned that it's easier to be in sync, establish good rapport with local team members. Yes, I agree, but reality is that a lot of businesses, they just want to reduce cost, and when you can get a remote, offshore person for a fraction of the cost, especially with the current market, that you can't find anyone with good experience less than $100-$150 per hour, just crazy, and you can get someone with same experience, $25-$30 from offshore. That's a big difference, and some companies may consider that over the local resources. At least a combination of offshore onshore, I think that's what I see a lot in the large organizations. So my key point in this slide was that a lot of people, they come to me, or Matt, they ask, what do we learn in Power BI, or how do we get a good job with Power BI? Power BI is just a tool. Like, you can't go and say, okay, I want to learn, I don't know, I want to get Hammer. Okay, that's a tool. What do you want to do? Do you want to become, I don't know, a handyman, a carpenter? What problem you're solving? And that's exactly the same here. If you want to get a job in Power BI work, you need to think about what is the main problem you want to tackle. And based on your background, if you come from business, which I find a lot of successful Power BI people that are mainly from business background. Like it was mentioned here, a few names, even Dan, who wrote the book for DA 100. That was one of the questions. He came from finance background, or even Matt, you come from same, and so on. But I mean, that's important because a business problem and you have a tool now that you can solve that business problem. Same for IT. If you think about it as, what is the problem you're solving? Is it a security? Is it building some like a good maintainable, scalable platform and so on? That's exactly what you should be thinking about. You find that problem and you work backwards to say, okay, what part of Power BI, what other tools, what skill set do I need to learn? Python, maybe not for all the roles, maybe only if you want to do some advanced analytics, you need to know Python. Because I get that we want to learn Power BI and Python and SQL in 6 months' time, we can have like a good job with high salary. Yes, probably that's right. But first you need to think about what is the end game for you. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, look, I think everyone has their own skill set, right? And we talked about a couple of podcasts earlier on, and in one of the podcasts that I spoke on, I talked about this continuum of skills. And so think of a continuum, so a straight line, and everyone fits on the straight line, right? So at one end, we have the CEO of a company who doesn't have a computer on their desk. They have an assistant sitting outside. They've got a whiteboard. They're a leader. They're a talker, but no technical skill at all. All right, so this is my technical continuum. At the other end, you've got the deepest machine coding programmer that you can imagine, who knows how to write in machine code, or they know how to program EPROMs so that the handheld device scanner will talk to the to whatever software that they're building, and they're writing the software in C# or something. And then everyone fits somewhere in between those two, because there's very few of those people at the two extremes. And so now if you were to draw a line halfway through that continuum, well, that's the cutover point when you move from IT to the business. So you go deep developer, machine coder, programmer, technical analyst, business analyst, and then you jump over the line and you go into the business. So then you become the Excel solution developer for the business, data analyst. Then you're getting into manager, more senior managers, and you sort of work your way through that way. And there's different functions and things. And so one of the things about Power BI that it occurs to me about Power BI is that it's a product that covers the crossover point on that continuum. So, so where I was very close to that crossover point in my entire career. So when I was in the business, I was almost at the IT side, and then I jumped on the other side, but I was never the deep programmer, right? And so I think Power BI is a product that for many people like me, and you might be people like me, we've been able to actually move a little bit more broadly through that continuum in that center area. Now, some of you might be programmers, right? So maybe you were an MDX programmer, or maybe you were an SSIS programmer before, and you find that there's not a lot of work. So then maybe you're further down the IT end of that continuum. So I think you have to try and find the right type of job for your fit. Now, I would not be a good fit for a traditional SQL database programmer, because, you know, writing indexes and understanding how to optimize queries and stuff, I mean, that's a skill that takes years to learn, right? I'm never going to be a good fit for that. I can do select star from sales. I mean, I can do that, but I'm never going to write the highly performing query that works over a direct query Power BI report that gives sub-second response, right? So there's a spot there for people if they're deeper technical. I think there's that other spot that you mentioned, Iman, around the admin side of things. I'm not sure that there's a pure IT play in the data modeling piece anymore, because I think the way Power BI, the model, the tables, the relationships, the star schema structure, I think that is relatively mature now, and I think any good business or IT person could do that role. Now, I'm not saying that if you come from a SQL Server background that's not an opportunity for you. I think it is, but the reality is that most companies don't build lots of new data sets every day. Typically, that's work that happens early on. Iman, I know in your experience, I know I've worked, you know, Artyom and some of the other guys that have been on site doing jobs. They build those models early on, and then from then on, it's just tweaking, right? You're not, you know, it's not like you're building a brand new data set every 3 weeks on in a brand new topic. So within an organization, I don't know that that's an ongoing role, unless it's a very large organization.
That's right. Yes, absolutely right, Matt. Look, there are some questions and some comments. Maybe I should have probably clarified that some people disagree that, you know, offshore is a good model. I didn't say that offshore is a good model. First of all, it's not my opinion. I'm saying that a lot of companies are now considering a hybrid model, or you know, half offshore, half onshore, something that is mainly for the you know, customer-facing roles or business analysis they do onshore, and then for the mechanical part or the parts that needs to be done on the back end, then they're using offshore team. But on the other hand, and someone mentioned correctly, this is opportunity for us. Like Agile, my company, we just had teams in Sydney and only clients in Sydney till the pandemic. And then after that, now we have teams everywhere, almost all around Australia. We have over from New Zealand. We have clients from over 70 countries now is serving. So that's a big opportunity for all of us. I mean, we have very good talents and very good experts in Power BI in Australia. So I think that's definitely an opportunity as well. Matt, do you want to answer some of the questions people ask about? I guess one question was about exam and that DA 100. I think that's still the latest one.
Yeah. Yeah, the DA 100 exam, as a couple of people have pointed out, Daniel Musluck has written a book. To my knowledge, it's the best book that's available. I haven't read it. I haven't done the DA 100 exam. I have been thinking about doing it, but this actually raises an important point. Do you need to do it? Well, I've hired IT people. So I've been an IT manager and I've had to hire IT people. And if I hired people for a particular skill, I would get someone from my team who had that skill. So if I was looking for an AS400 programmer, I would have an interview with prospective client employees, and I'd get my deep technical person to ask some deep technical questions to see if they understand. Frankly, I wouldn't care so much if they had a AS400 certificate A issued by IBM. I mean, look, I'm not trying to say there's anything wrong with it. What I'm saying is, to me, that is not a substitute for a good technical question in a job interview. So if I was employing someone to be a Power BI data modeler, I would ask them, under what circumstances would you use a many-to-many relationship? And tell me about how would you configure the cross-filtering of such a relationship? I'd ask them to explain context transition to me and give me an example of where it's used. I mean, I would ask. So I'm a technical expert in DAX and data modeling. But the point is, when I was working in IT, I didn't have those skills because I was a manager, but I would always bring in someone with those skills to ask deep technical questions. So you can't fake those skills. As long as you have someone who has those skills, you can ask the right question. So,
which is the gap, Matt, because I find that a lot of companies, they don't know what to ask. They just say, oh, we want a Power BI, I don't know, report builder, analyst, developer, whatever. And they think that one role can do everything, and they don't even know what to ask. And in most cases, they just want some reports. They don't care about what is the foundation of that. Is it a good data model, star schema, taxes? So this is a big gap, and I don't know.
It's interesting. I mean, maybe I should offer that as a service, job interview as a service. I mean, that's something that I could extend.
We actually do this like a COE as a service now, kind of like we started that to say that you can do part of that is also to build your internal team. But absolutely, as I said, this could be a big gap that people like you can fill in and say that, okay, these are type of questions you need to ask, and you can. Depends on the role you can ask. That context transition is one of my questions actually, and 9 out of 10 they don't know. Even when they rate they rate themselves as 9, 8 out of 10, but they don't know the answer. And that's probably one of the areas I want to point out in the one of these slides. What are the skill set that we need to learn in Power BI? And probably we can talk about it a bit in details, but I think that depends on what role you have. But most people think that they just need to build report, and especially managers on the business side, they get excited. Oh, this guy came in and in just a week now I have a, I don't know, finance or marketing report or something. And next month when they want to scale it, they want to add some more information. They have some maybe actual data, they want to add budget, but because it's all flat structure on the back end, now they struggle, and then they understand, okay, there's more than just visualization. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, look, I want to just tie this back to the previous discussion as well about the DA 100 exam, because the skills that you've got on the page here, as I understand it, as I said, I haven't done the exam, but I understand there's very broad coverage in the DA 100 exam. You have to know a bit of everything. And so, one good thing about an exam is that at least you're benchmarking your breadth of knowledge against that standard which Microsoft has set. But I would suggest to everyone on this call that, and many people have talked about salary, right? And, you know, the truth is salary is very important to me, and a high salary is better than a small salary. I mean, that's the way I am, and I'm sure many of you are the same. I mean, job satisfaction is also very important to me. This is one of the reasons why I left my corporate job and went into my own business, was because I was trying to find a better balance of job satisfaction. And just to close that point off, I mean, when in my role in IT at Coca-Cola, the only way I could continue to achieve my salary aspirations was to become a more senior manager. And the more senior I became as a manager, the less data modeling I was doing, because I had to manage people and manage politics and stuff instead of actually doing the stuff that I love doing. And so we've always got to find that trade-off between the, you know, what you like doing, what you're good at doing, and achieving that salary. But I would suggest to everyone that you will make more money in your career if you're a deep specialist than you will if you're a generalist. And so I would suggest to pick some of these skills and be really good at that, rather than try and be average at all of the skills. And so, and this comes back to your earlier point then, Iman, about the different types of roles. So, you know, if you're going to sort of provide an end-to-end data modeling and report building service, then definitely you want data wrangling, data modeling, DAX, data visualization. Those 4 points, I would say, are absolutely fundamental. And if you're really good at that, then I reckon you can get a job with heaps of small businesses out there. Now, I mean, I had a call similar to what you were saying, Iman, but I had a call with a client in the US yesterday, actually, on this exact topic, where he just lost one of his Power BI employees, and he wanted just to bounce some stuff off me about, you know, what sort of skill should he be looking for to replace that individual within their organization. And so it depends on the size of the organization and whether it's business-based or IT-based. So I guess coming back to your question, Iman, I think you have to be a little bit careful in the Power BI and the Power space, so the Power Platform space, because it's just growing. And I do this full time. Iman does this full time, right? This is all I do, and I can't do it all. I cannot do it all. It's too much. I'm struggling to keep up with the monthly updates on desktop, let alone you know, trying to understand the depths of administration and architecture, and you know, page and ad reports, and R integration, and Python integration, and custom visual building, and Charticulator, and blah blah blah. You know, it just can't be done.
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, Matt, again, back to my point, these are all tools in our toolbox. So it's good to have some of them, you know, handy and say, okay, I know the key or core skill set, like, which is data modeling, DAX, and Power Query, visualization as well. But then, do I need to know how to do row-level security in a dynamic way, or object-level security? Maybe no. Maybe it depends on my role. But I need to know there is such feature, and there is a blog post by Matt Allington or Reza Rad, and whenever I want to do that, I can go and you know, maybe read that blog and copy paste some codes and tweak. So I think that's the you know, the problem solving is the key with some of those core, and then some of them we just need to know that there is such option. You know, when there is a new update in Power BI, of course there's a lot of them, and no one has time to go into all of those and one by one read. Maybe there are a few people who do this. Some of them are in my team as well, but I'm not one of them. I just spend maybe 10-20 minutes just to see what's available. Maybe I pick a couple of them that excite me most, and the rest of them, whenever it comes to it, like a need to do that, I go and I can maybe watch a video. And there are tons of blog posts and YouTube videos and, you know, resources these days that you can always learn when you need them. You don't need to overload yourself with too much information and just keep learning and learning without using them in a job. So I think
totally agree. Yeah. There's another question. Sorry, Iman. It says from BA. what's the difference between a Power BI developer and a Power BI data analyst? Of course, these terms come, I think you found them on Seek, you said, Iman, right? So it really depends on what was intended by the person who's seeking those roles. But I would suggest that anyone that advertised for a Power BI developer is probably an IT department, because it's a very IT term. I don't think anyone from the business who wanted a business role would advertise for a Power BI developer, but I think they would advertise for a Power BI data analyst. So my first observation would be that they would be IT and business roles. Now, whether a Power BI data analyst, whether the expectation is that they'll be able to build data models, it probably is, but maybe the business people don't even know what they need. Once again, an anecdote from my background, and in fact, I've had both of these roles. I used to build Power Pivot reports for my customer. Not once did they come to me and say, I need a Power Pivot report with a new data model. No one ever asked me for that. They didn't even know that that's what I was giving them. They just said, I need this problem solved, or can you build me a report that does this? And so I think that's one insight. Another insight, I did a role for 12 months, maybe longer, 18 months, a couple of days a week for a client, which was more like a Power BI developer. So I was on more of a pure Power BI developer. And I got to tell you, it was not one of my most enjoyable engagements. And the main reason was that I was one role removed from the customer. So the Power BI, remember I said requirements gathering, technical specs, then you hand it over and build the solution. So I was sort of that third person in the puzzle. So they needed someone who was very good at data modeling so they could build a good model, and I could do that for them. But I hated not being able to directly engage with the customer and gather the requirements myself and do the prototyping and continuous improvement. And I mean, the reason I didn't keep doing that role was because I didn't enjoy it. I wanted to be touching the customer. Now, not physically touching, but you know what I mean. But look, I'm sure there are people who really enjoy that sort of building the best quality solution on requirements that have been delivered to them. So I'm not criticizing that role. What I'm saying is it wasn't a good fit for me. And so I think everyone needs to ask that question about themselves. How do you feel about engaging with customers? And if that's not your core strength, or if it's not something that makes you excited and gives you job satisfaction, then you shouldn't seek out one of those roles that would expect you to do that.
Absolutely.
I mean, there's a bit of common sense there, I guess. But
yeah, no, that's very important, and that's absolutely important to have the passion for what you do to be successful. Damien said something interesting, is that Power is to Microsoft as I is to Apple, like iPhone, iPad. I think I can call it is. How many products or services do you know in Microsoft with Power? Like Power BI, PowerPoint, Power Query, Power Pivot, Power Automate, Power Map, which is kind of like a dead now. I heard that they're not going to even do any development. Power View is also dead.
Power View is dead. Yeah. Power Apps. That's right.
Power Apps. Yes. So Microsoft is good at confusing people with names and then changing them and changing the, keeping the name in the code somewhere so you get more confused.
Roland also made a comment here about communication skills is very important. So I would definitely say that. In fact, I would say that's important in pretty much every job, but definitely in this space. And I talked before about the continuum and that crossover point. And one of the reasons I've been successful that I talked about in my other podcasts and stuff is my ability to translate the IT, so the technical concepts, with the business concepts. I mean, actually, that is my core skill, is being able to translate. And so that's communication, right? Communication is listening, understanding, interpreting, responding. And so, yeah, I mean,
do you have any tips, Matt, for improving communication? Because I agree, this is a key skill set in every job, but specifically to client-facing roles like maybe a business or data analyst. So what do you think?
Well, look, I I come from a sales and customer service background, and the core skill in selling is a skill, right? It's something that you can learn. I would say communication is a key skill, if not the key skill in selling. And so there was a technique that we used to teach at Coke called the layer technique, which I've just put in the chat. Layer: listen, acknowledge, explore, respond. And so this is just a simple mind acronym for our salespeople when they used to go out. So a customer would talk to you. So the most important skill is to listen, and to listen not with the intent to correct, to interject, to object. That's not the purpose you're listening. You're listening for the purpose of understanding. So, you know, and the saying, you got 2 ears and 1 mouth, you should be listening twice as much as you're talking. So the first thing that you could do to improve your communication is to listen with the purpose of understanding. And then, so A is acknowledging. So, okay, so you told me this, or, you know, are you saying this? So you're sort of responding, but once again, not responding with the intention to correct or to interject, but of trying to validate that what you heard is correct. Listen, acknowledge, explore. And then exploring is like the, you know, asking the 20 questions. Why do you do that? Why is that important to you? Because if you ask those types of questions, you might actually uncover that there's actually a root problem deeper down the track that the customer is not telling you about, maybe because they don't even know that there's a problem, or they've never thought about it before. So a skilled communicator not only listens and acknowledges what's being said to them, listens with the intent to understand, but also asks questions to explore around the edges and to test the customer's understanding of the problem. And so, you know, if you ask a good exploratory question, the customer might respond with, I don't know, I've never thought about it that way before. I mean, that's a sign you're asking a good exploratory question. And then R is respond. So listen, acknowledge, explore, then respond. And it's an active listening technique. And
100%.
And if everyone put that into their daily communication, even dealing with your wife or husband or partner or whatever, I'm not saying I got lots of flaws in life, and I know how to do lots of things. I don't always do them that well, but I would say that would be my tip on improving communication.
Absolutely, especially that active listening, Matt. And I'll tell you a personal story that now I remember. That was before pandemic, and I got a call from a retailer, that the famous one in Australia, and they wanted to have a meeting with me. Went to Melbourne. That was, you know, no online like now, but had a 1.5 hour meeting with different managers. I just talked maybe for 1 or 2 minutes, and rest of the meeting I was just listening, and, you know, exactly as you said. And then at the end of that, they said, okay, now you know our requirements and we can work with you. So we signed the contract. So I didn't say anything. It was just maybe 1, maximum 2 minutes of talk. The rest of them, they just told me, and I listened and I asked some questions, and that's it. So very important to have this active listening skill set. So Matt, I just have a couple of more slides, and we have maybe 5-10 minutes, then we can answer some of the questions. Again, I'm happy to be challenged if you think that's not right, but I think it's always a mix of different skill set. Like if you come from business or you want to do data analysis, you need to have a good business domain or that process knowledge. And then data and technology is kind of like yes, it's important, but it's secondary. But if you are maybe BI developer from IT, then maybe data and technology becomes your main core skill set, and then you need to know about the business domain or the process as well. What do you think? Like, I know that you need to know a lot of things, but do you think you need to pick a couple of those core skill set and then maybe focus on those more?
No, I totally agree. And it comes back to the earlier point that I said about not trying to sort of be good at everything. Just another parallel example, it's not one of these job roles that you talked about, but a job that comes to mind is a project manager. a project manager does not, in theory, does not need domain skills, because managing a project, you don't have to have good, deep technical skills. You need good communication skills, good planning skills, good organization skills, you know, and those sorts of things. So, yeah, so if you go back to the previous slide, yeah, so the data analyst, you know, data analytics is definitely a skill, but understanding the business, which is the domain skills, I would say, is and process. I'm assuming you mean sort of business process and
yeah, the process of decision making when they want, because at the end of the day, it's all about making informed decision or some actions. So we need to understand how they come with that decision, so we can help them and support them in that.
So I would say yes. The other thing that it's related to an earlier point that I made, that Power BI has sort of closed the gap. It was when Roland raised the point about Power BI bringing IT and business together. I would say that these two diagonals that you've got here, Iman, back in the world of MDX and SQL Server Analysis Services, multi-dimensional, I would say these would have been two clear jobs. But now I think the data analyst still needs to be strongest in those yellow ones, but definitely can have some growing and burgeoning skills in data and technology facilitated by Power BI. And including ETL, even facilitated by Power Query, right? Whereas if you flip back to the other one, again, Iman, the BI developer, that's the one that I said was typically advertised by the IT department. That's the one that's more likely to be that job role that I was in for a while, where I didn't have the direct contact with the customer. And if you're not having that direct contact with the customer, then that domain and process skills become less important. But if you're going to do that role, you want to be the best data modeler, technology specialist that's out there, because, you know, if you're going to be specializing in those things, you better be pretty good at it.
Absolutely. And Matt, I find it in many of the organizations that I go, and this is a real example of one assessment that I did for a company with like more than maybe 5-6 people in the analytics or BI team, that is usually very unbalanced teams. And again, depends on type of company and teams. There might be people who are very good at, you know, business side, but then they may not have anyone who can do admin task, or, you know, someone with a good data modeling skill set, especially these two, because I see that a lot in many organizations, that they are good with building reports, but they don't have a good data model behind that, or they don't have good admin who can maintain and manage the security and the workspace and the release management, and also, you know, maybe some of the features and things that can be very sensitive. Like I saw that in one insurance company, they were a publish to web report, so the one that you can tick publish to web, that was, you know, made available by someone who left organization, and no one knew that was still there. You know, that's very, very sensitive data that is now shared with everyone, and no one was even monitoring that. So what do you think about this, and how do you think companies can tackle this? Because not every company can hire like 10 different roles or 5-6 people to do this. So what are the options, do you think?
Well, I think you have to look at what your primary need is and fill those roles first. And there's going to be some gaps. Increasingly, I'm finding through the people that I train, it sort of comes back, Iman, to the point that you made earlier on, that awareness is an important part of the process, even if you're not an expert on the particular topic. So a lot of people that come to my training courses on data modeling and DAX are managers and people, even people who think they're going to be doing this data modeling themselves. And it's important that they have an understanding of how it works. But when they get back to the office and they get back to the day-to-day grind, and they've got reality, they have to deliver reports and they have to deliver the sales numbers this month and those sorts of things, often what happens is that they don't have enough hands-on experience to be able to keep those skills up. And so that's where they would either go out and hire someone that fills in that gap around the data wrangling, data modeling areas, probably particularly, maybe even report building to an extent. But then if you can't afford that, then there are other outsourced options. And so I've already mentioned that I do that as a service on an hourly basis. Iman, I think, I don't want to speak for you, but I think you provide that, but more sort of daily work and stuff like that. Is that a fair?
Yes, it's mainly on a project basis, but we also do support, not like an hourly, but we do some like as a COE type as a service, or supporting as a second level or third level, mainly when they have their internal team with skill gaps. So I think that that's a good answer. Like you don't have to hire like 6-7 people, but you need to understand where the gaps are and then plan for that and say, okay, this part can be outsourced to Matt Allington because he's DAX expert or data modeling expert, and then for admin, can you hire someone full-time? No, then you can maybe outsource it to someone who can manage your environment. But that's also an opportunity for us, in this meetup, that there are skill sets that are very, I haven't found any good, not many good admin, Power BI admins, or for instance, people who are very good at data modeling are usually very expensive, and that's, I guess, opportunity for all of us. So I put together this slide again. You may not agree with that, but I think usually when we start our Power BI career, we may start learning Power Query, how to shape data, massage data with Power Query and M, then data modeling and DAX to make that data maybe a strata schema or standard foundation for visualization. But these are maybe the core skill set that we have, but then there are a lot of other things. You may need to learn about data flows, which is Power Query in the web, if you want to have a maybe highly scalable, and for some use cases you may move them to data flows. You may need to learn about how to publish reports using apps, workspaces for collaboration, for sharing. DevOps is now becoming more and more important. How to do, DevOps, and building maybe Power BI becomes part of your CI/CD. Continuous integration, continuous development, maybe using some DevOps tools like Azure DevOps. Security, as I said, now with a lot of features in Power BI, security becomes more and more important. Custom visuals. Some people may just want to use the standard out-of-the-box visuals. Some organizations have very specific needs. So that's also opportunity. If you come from maybe some programming background, you can build custom visuals. Embedded, Power BI embedded, how to embed it in an application, maybe for ISVs or some line of business applications that you want to embed Power BI to that. And not many people know how to do this. Admin, as I said, an admin comes with, how to set admin portal with all those configurations that are changing every month, and then, API monitoring, how to check to make sure everything is working, gateway setup, and so on. So again, my point here in this slide is that Power BI is not just connecting to a data source, building data model and visualization. There are also many other skill set that you may learn, depends on type of role. And those are the ones that are probably, I guess, less competition and a higher chance for you to get better jobs or improve your, I don't know, salary, job title, or whatever you want to call. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, I agree. And I just want to comment on that embedded piece, because the number of times I've flicked work to a friend of mine in the US where people contact me and I'm working with them. In fact, I even work with customers, and then they come to some point where they need some embedded. This is a complete specialist area. And so if you're a web developer, if you have a web developer background, I reckon learn about embedded, how to build a front end on top of Power BI, and then if you've got a reasonable understanding of Power BI assets and how it works, then that can only help. But I think there's work out there for that type of embedded front end building.
Absolutely. Well, we have only a few minutes left, and I see still 83 people on the call, which is good. And by the way, all this is getting recorded, and we will share that with you hopefully next day or two. So I have one more slide, and then we can go back to the questions and maybe try to answer as many as we can. So again, as I said, some skills that you learn as a core for Power BI, like Power Query or DAX, data modeling and visualization, or the other ones that I mentioned. But outside Power BI, you may also learn Power Apps to basically maybe scenarios like you may want to add comment or have a data entry form inside Power BI. You may learn Power Automate to now with like even today's update has better, I guess, connectivity. You may want to refresh Power BI data set from Power BI that is calling a Power Automate, or do something, based on event-driven type of actions. Python or R, obviously for data science and advanced analytics. You can do either inside Power Query or using those R and Python visuals. Information security, obviously cyber security is a very hot topic these days, and that is also related to Power BI, how to set all those, labels and implement security, either dynamic, static, row-level security, object-level security, apps, workspaces, analysis, which can be data understanding, business understanding, storytelling, presentation, and so on. So, I mean, when we talk about Power BI, it's only one tool, but there are so many skills that depends on type of role and what even business area or IT you're working with. You need to learn those. And obviously in 1.5 hours, we couldn't cover everything in a lot of details, but that hopefully give you a bit of overview and maybe some keywords that you can go and learn. So
can I just add one thing to that, Iman, because it's a good slide and they've all been good slides. But this last point, analysis, historically I've had discussions with people and heard other people share views that data analysis is technology agnostic. I mean, and I think that's true. I think the skill to understand and be inquisitive about data is technology agnostic. But I firmly believe, for the reasons that I said earlier about the success of Power BI, that now is the time to commit and to stop being technology agnostic and make a commitment to Power BI. Because, I think Excel has been the analysis tool of choice. I think Tableau was the tool of choice for people also for a long period of time. But I just see Power BI as becoming the tool of choice. And so I'm doing some work outside of work as a volunteer at some stage. And I just come forward and say, I'm doing it in Power BI. And, if other people want to do it another way, that's fine. I don't have any problems with that, but I can't help. My analytical skills, I'm going to put my effort in using Power BI. I'm going to be the expert in the Power BI domain of analysis and analytics. And with all of those other things that you touched on, Iman, in order to be able to support that. So I don't think there's anything wrong with being an analytics expert and committing to a tool. And the best tool to commit to is the one that's likely to succeed, the one that's going to be most successful, the one that's got a highest level of demand for jobs out there. So I'd say commit to Power BI. Amy's asking, where could you get some volunteer experience? I always recommend people go into the forums. There's if you go to community.powerbi.com, a very active forum. Admittedly, over the years, the questions that are coming out are becoming much more complex because as everyone's skill level goes up, the questions become more complex. But I think that's a great place to get some experience. Also, you could contact your local charity. I mean, I've done charity work before, helping out people. So, find a charity that you care about and just contact them and ask them if they need any help to build any reports. The other thing I'd suggest you do is just look at your own data and find something that you care about. So I mentioned my COVID report. I was very frustrated that I couldn't get the data, so I built my own reports. And maybe build something on a banking report. I built a report on my solar data that I get from my solar panels. So find something that you're interested in. There's lots of free data on the web. I mean, if you go to is it gapminder.org? It's a great site.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, I tell you, Matt, a story that someone who is probably one of the best guys in my team now, he used to come to our meetup, and one day he showed me a report that he built based on like a shark attacks in Australia, some open data. And then at the time he was new in Australia, he was looking for a job. But when I saw that report as an example, that so okay, this is a good quality and good job. So I hired him. So, I mean, a lot of people ask about how do we find a job? Do we get certification? Do we go to this and that? Well, yes, these are all good, but also build something so you can have a portfolio or some examples to show. When I get CVs, I always ask, do you have samples to show me? If they don't, that means probably, how do I know unless they have like a maybe a good profile with many years of experience, or they have something to show me. Yes, the A100 is a good baseline, but it doesn't mean that you are expert at all. It means that you know some techniques in Power BI. That's all.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. There's lots of great free data sets out there. I remember Chris Webb in early days of Pivot Power BI was built on car accidents in London, and he got the accident stats and built some reports and stuff. So so go and find some good free data and build something. But most importantly, pick something that you're interested in, so that because then it doesn't take any time when you're really interested.
Exactly. I just pick one more question, and then we may finish in a couple of minutes, Matt. There was a question about what do we think about Power BI in maybe 5 years' time. Well, I share my point of view, and I think Power BI is now becoming a new Excel. So what you see now that Excel is not that you don't find a job at that say I want Excel expert or Excel developer, but Excel becomes part of each every business function. That Power BI is becoming that new Excel, and I think the future will be that more and more specialization and specific roles becomes, I guess, high demand. Like, yes, everyone needs to learn Power BI, but then you may become Power BI, as I said, maybe admin, or Power BI security expert, or Power BI DAX expert or something. So if you can specialize, again, depends on type of role, but that could be maybe a good way to differentiate. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, look, I think so. I think Excel is going to be there forever. There's things that you can do in Excel that you can't do in Power BI. But having said that, I hardly use Excel anymore. If I do use Excel, it's to build master data for Power BI. That's my most common use case for Excel these days. So, but I think if you're a business person, then Power BI is a substitute for Excel. And in fact, increasingly, I think businesses would expect you to have Excel and Power BI skills, but they're perhaps not those deep data modeling skills, DAX skills. I mean, it doesn't mean that if you've got those skills, it'll help you. There's no question about it. But this is going to be here in 5 to 10 years. This will see my career out, although my career doesn't have much time left on the end. But yeah. Okay, so I think we really need to wrap up, Iman. We're sort of gone a little bit over. So I'm so pleased to see so many people stay on. So I'm assuming that's a vote of value. So thank you for everyone for hanging on. Sorry.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, everyone. And as I said, we will share the recording, and
so we'll get the recording and the slides as well.
Yes,
yeah. So we'll get that out, and so we'll announce that through the meetup. For anyone that attended the session, we'll put a link.
And for that, before I forget, that one free ticket, maybe if the first person who puts the email address, because we don't know if you really need that or not, but if anyone is interested in that free Power BI training, which is next week, please put the email address, the first one that I get in the personal message to me. I will give that voucher to him or her. Thanks, everyone, and have a good evening.
Okay, looks like it's Oscar.
Oscar. Okay,
we know Oscar.
Okay.
All right, thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining. See you, man.
Bye.